We have a quorum, and hopefully Kataraina will be here very soon, and I see Stu's joined us online. So we'll just get started because, as you know, it's quite a short hour this morning. We're hoping to wind up just after 11, and that way we've got time to do our site visits to the projects, and not sort of push ourselves too much. So I'm going to hand over to Mary, who's going to open us up with a Mihi Karakia.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Nau mai haere mai ki Arawa Review Trust. Nice seeing you all here this morning, and thank you for coming. We're going to start with our karakia. Mihi nui tātou. He honore, he kororia ki te atua, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Āmini.
Kia ora. So we have apologies from Perry Marks as well as Councillor Clarkson. I don't, and perhaps waiting for Kataraina for lateness, I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure she'll join us as soon as she can. Just a confirmation of the agenda. Oh, my apologies. Thank you, Delia. And Mary, thank you. All in favour? Carried. Just confirming the agenda. If it's really, really important, we could add, do we have anything that we wanted to add to general business? No, kapai. Awesome. And thank you. That's the download. And give me a second. Thank you. All in favour. Carried. And just observing the interest register, and if there's anything that we need to add to that, we just let Leah know. And so we're just heading on to the minutes, and just aware that there are only a few that were present there, but I'll just hand that over to those that were present. Stu, Minister Nebo, Councillor Nebo was the only other one that was there as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to move, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Delia. So just confirming that the minutes have been read and have been moved.
Okay. All right, we'll go now to item 6, which is the fast track approvals bill reports to the trust. I'm not sure who's speaking to this.
Madam Chair, that'll be me, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, do I understand that 10 minutes has been put aside for that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try and keep to time. So this is really an item for information concerning the recently released fast track approvals bill. So it's only a couple of weeks old. We're still getting our heads around it. This item sort of sets out how it works and some of the implications for both the council and TART and other iwi groups. This is a bill. It's in the bill stage at the moment, so it's open for public submissions until the 19th of April. Our policy staff are pulling together a submission which potentially will go to the select committee. So the bill is aimed at making the approvals process faster and more efficient. And it's targeted at regionally and nationally significant projects. So, you know, housing developments, renewable energy, mining, aquaculture, you name it. If it's regional, if it has regional or national benefits, then it potentially qualifies for the fast track process. So this is a standalone bill. It proposes a one-stop shop type of regime that would allow fast tracking for all of the permits that any large project might require. So RMA, of course, but also things like the EEZ and Continental Shelf Act, the Crown Minerals Act, Heritage New Zealand Act, and so forth. So a project can become eligible for fast tracking through one of two ways. Either a referral by a joint decision of the ministers for infrastructure, for regional development and transport, upon application for that referral, or it might be listed in the Act itself. The bill. So the bill anticipates that a number of projects, we don't exactly know how many, will be listed in the bill for automatic referral to the fast track process. Once a project has been referred to that process, it will be considered by an expert panel, and they'll apply or recommend relevant conditions and consents and permits and so forth. The project will then be sent back to the joint ministers, the three ministers that I mentioned before, to either approve or decline the project. And ministers will be able to send it back to the panel if they determine that the conditions are too onerous. So there's been a lot of public comment about the bill since it's been released, most of it negative. And I think, a sort of any objective view of it would sort of see a number of aspects of it as being quite startling. So the various concerns that have been raised about the bill, well, firstly, the listed projects that are supposed to be in the bill are not actually listed yet. So that's a big empty page. The government has indicated that it will add them in, but it seems to be that that will be after the public process of the selection. The criteria for referral to the process are quite ambiguous, and arguably the threshold for getting into the fast track process is quite low because of that very ambiguity. There is provisions in the Act for criteria where projects would be ineligible for the fast track process, and for example, within national parks, that sort of thing. But there is no environmental basis for ineligibility. So, for example, there are no, climate change considerations that would strike a project out from the start, or, hazardous, effects, coastal effects, that sort of thing. So none of those sorts of effects are factored in terms of the ineligibility criteria. A lot of the criticism has talked about ministerial overreach, and there's been sort of mentioned that the power given to basically the development ministers is fairly unprecedented. And of course, the Crown itself can be a developer, so potentially you can have a situation where the Crown proposes a development. They are then the gatekeeper to the fast track approvals process, and they are also the final decision maker on the applications for the project. Aside from that, the decision-making framework has been criticised. In this regard, you've got the purpose of the bill is solely development focused. And when it comes to final decisions on projects, the bill's purpose will override all other considerations. So there might be, for example, important RMA considerations, but they can be effectively disregarded in the final decision making. Interestingly, even though RMA matters generally have to be considered, Section 8 doesn't figure there, so it's completely absent. It talks about section 5, 6 and 7, but section 8 is missing. I'm not sure whether that's deliberate or an omission. Panels, recommendations are made by an expert panel, but they're only recommendations, of course. The collective experience of the panels has to include things like Tikanga Māori, Treaty of Waitangi, which is obviously good, but there are no environmental credentials required for any of the panel members. And of course, the ministers who finally decide don't have to accept the panel's recommendation. In terms of sort of direct participation rights and implications there is no formal submission process. Parties are invited to provide written comments, but there is no right to be heard, and the rights of appeal are quite limited. Anyone who makes written comments has a right of appeal, but it's only to the High Court on points of law. So questions of merit are not appealable. So that's probably where I should leave it. That's a very quick run through. As I say, Council will need to consider where it stands on this bill. And in particular, I guess, whether it tilts the playing field for consenting in a sort of to an unreasonable extent in the direction of development at the expense of other considerations. So that will be something that policy will be taken to Council in due course. All right, thank you. Happy to try and answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Mark. Are there any questions from the committee members?
No, just Mark, that your report is very thorough and detailed, very sort of helpful to understand in that detail, given the lack, I guess, of transparency in this the fast track proposal, what we're sort of receiving or not receiving, you know, and just sort of having as a board is in terms of Te Ture Whaimana, and again, thanks for sort of referring in there sort of areas where the council believe there's probably sticking points. I guess just my question in around Te Ture Whaimana, the Act itself, section 6AA, and it refers to call-ins. Section 6AA, which is matters of national significance. That has there been any thought around perhaps, and I guess this is coming from where we tend to, or where we Te Ture Whaimana has been sort of interpreted in different through different powers and legislation. I guess for us, as we start to think in for Te Ture Whaimana, creating quite the interpretation of such is actually probably timely for us to start thinking actually how do we set that narrative and how we understand it to sit. So yeah, I guess just the question is there any sort of thought or sort of review specifically in the Act that you may have seen?
Well, certainly to, yeah. So Te Ture Whaimana is noted as a matter that is recognised and acknowledged by the Crown as the key direction-setting document for the river. So that is in the fast track approvals bill, and of course, you know, questions of interpretation and how it is, you know, how it affects actual applications. There's quite a bit of case law now about that. So, you know, we certainly have a good steer as to, you know, in terms of the regional council as to how we think we should go about addressing Te Ture Whaimana in consenting. The problem in the fast track approvals bill is that considerations like Te Ture Whai Mana and any other national direction, and in fact any other RMA matter entirely, can be set aside in favour of granting consent for a project, even if it's found to be inconsistent with Te Ture Whai Mana or that national direction. So it's not like normal consenting. It's where national direction is paramount. This is a completely different set of processes.
Thank you.
And through you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you again. I just want to reiterate what Delia said around the breakdown that you've given us, Mark. It's really helpful, and I think our environmental manager, will probably find it useful in forming the submission. So, that's really great. Thank you. And just, I guess from a TARIT point of view, we could potentially submit 4 times. 3, one from each affiliate and one from the TARIT entity itself. And as you've outlined, as the bill stands at the moment, we cannot support it as it is at the moment. We wouldn't be supporting it. And just around we have issues also with the select committee. So there is no, they haven't told us sort of what that formation would look like. There is somebody there with Mātauranga experience, but they do not speak on behalf of iwi. So there's really quite a long way to go, I think, around what their select committee, how it will be formed and who they have on there and what that process looks like and actually what their validation is. The other thing is around non-permitted activities and whether or not it doesn't seem as though those would remain the same, I don't know. And whether or not projects that have been declined before under a non-permitted activity, whether or not they would be able to actually now come in through the fast track consenting process. So there's all sorts of...
Yeah, I can clarify that point. They would. The short answer is that they would have that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's what bothers, that in itself is a worry as well for us, and they're not being transparent and coming forward. But I'm just going to leave it there because, I do, again, express our thanks because it's a really thorough paper.
Could I just make one very quick last point, which is that, and especially if TARIT is looking to make a submission, there is a very good report on the MFE website called Supplementary Analysis Report Treaty Impact Analysis for the Fast Track Approvals Bill. That's a 9-page report, which is by the ministry itself, which is a very good summary of how it would affect treaty interests and Māori interests and values generally.
Thank you. Great. We just note an action point to send through a link to committee members because we were all furiously trying to write that very long.
Sure. I'll send it through. Is Dave there? I'll send it to Dave.
Yeah, supplementary. No, good stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you again, Mark. I know you're beaming in from the other side of the globe to join us this morning. He's part of our Devon office, is what we refer to Mark. Really appreciate you putting together the report as the co-chair has noted. So we're receiving this for information. So do I have a mover in Michaela? A second in Delia. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. We've got Haven.
Oh, Haven. Okay.
I believe he's.
Okay. Kia ora, Haven. Just handing over to you now for the draft long-term plan update.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ko urupi te whakapaparanga mai, ko Pimireti te whenua tupu, ko Pimireti te kāinga, he Corporate Planning Manager OE, ko Kunihira Arohe o Waikato o, ko Haven Walsh toko ingoa, tēnā tātou katoa. So yeah, kia ora, good morning. I'm Haven Walsh, Corporate Planning Manager here at Waikato Regional Council. So this is just a brief report to provide a bit of an update on our long-term plan process, note those key timeframes for our consultation, and also outline the topics that we're seeking feedback on. So I understand most people will have a pretty good understanding of LTP processes, so I won't dwell on that, but just want to highlight those key timeframes there that are on page 24 of your agenda. So the consultation period is running from 2nd of April through to 2nd of May. Hearings, we've got those scheduled from the 14th to the 17th of May, with deliberations then from the 24th to the 29th of May. And then we've got council meetings scheduled on the 25th of June to adopt the long-term plan. Then in terms of the 5 proposals that we're seeking feedback on, the first one there is around increasing our natural heritage rate. So this is essentially just to keep up with inflation, and there's a lot more demand for that fund. So we're just seeking to, I guess, increase that rate to account for the inflationary changes and the increase in demand in that area, that with all the community work that's going on and lots of people wanting to get in there and do that biodiversity related work. Our second proposal is around collecting a regional rate for public transport. So this essentially would align us with the rest of the country who rate this way. I guess it's kind of like an administrative one. There'll be no change or no rating impact. It's simply the Waikato Regional Council collecting the rate instead of the district councils who do it now, and then provide that rate through to the regional council. So seeking feedback on that one there, and then there's a couple of rating models outlined that would seek further feedback on, and then if it goes ahead, look to implement that in the years 25, 26. The third proposal in the consultation document, or the third and fourth one are related to economic development. So the first one's around whether to discontinue the Regional Development Fund, and the fourth one is around continuing the funding of Te Waka. And then the last topic that we're seeking feedback on is around funding for primary industry compliance, a bit of a technical rating one, just to make sure that we've got the rating mix right for the benefits and who's paying for what. So I think I'll leave it with that, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Great, thank you, Haven. I'll just open it up to the floor if there's any comments from members. No, I think
just to note, Haven, I have distributed our little business cards that have the QR code to allow committee members to link through to the LTP on the website. Just a much easier way to access the I suppose more in-depth information behind each of those proposals, and also an avenue for submission, whether that's for the group as a whole or individually.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I can ask that Haven, that the LTP long-term plan draft report is accepted, please. Thank you, Mary. All in favour? Carried.
All right, so on, gosh, we're making quick time. I like it. Item 8. This is the freshwater policy review program update. And Peter, have you given Naomi language? Oh, Naomi.
Yeah. Kia ora, Naomi Crawford, Toku Inua, Team Leader, Water Policy, Waikato Regional Council. I'm standing in for Peter Wishart. So good morning. I'm just providing an update, obviously, to the Freshwater Policy Review Work Program for March. This report obviously covers what we've been doing, a progress update. It also covers update on the new coalition government's intention to replace, the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and the National Environmental Standard for Freshwater. So Council has obviously taken a significant amount of work to address freshwater issues across the region. We've been doing extensive engagement, which was we've done a lot of engagement in 2022 and then 2023, and that covers tangata whenua, regional community and sector groups. So we're looking at, so under this program, we're doing policy development to amend the planning documents, and the notification was required by December 2024. So obviously in light of the coalition government, which has signalled that they intend to replace the MPSFM and the NES, if WRC staff are developing a new revised freshwater policy review program with around some key milestones, which we're about to present to Council for further consideration. Another thing to note is that we still have our targeted, obviously, group as well, Ngā Tira Mataronga. The purpose of that group is to provide a vehicle for tangata whenua to help inform freshwater policy for inclusion for the WRC planning documents prior to notification. Also, we've provided just a brief update on Plan Change 1 in this report as well. We're not expecting to, so the Environment Court process is still progressing. Parties, we're awaiting the court's decision, which is expected mid to late 2024 this year. So I'm happy to take any questions from there.
And Chair, can I just, Naomi, can I just ask, is there a kind of like a timeline we can give out to not only councillors but to our partners of what's happening with Plan Change 1, National Policy Statement, and the freshwater policy? Because there's been so much, there's a lot of, I get a lot of questions, especially from down Taupo way, just on where they sit, like, you know, from big iwi or big corporations that are asking, you know, because something's been pushed out to the 27th. I'm not sure whether that's a national policy statement, and even I'm unsure of where we sit, because it's, you know, really confusing at the moment. And I think it would be clear if we could have a document that comes out to say, right, this is where Plan Change 1, we expect it to go to the you know, maybe to the Supreme Court or the court, where we stand in the national policy and what we have to do for the freshwater policy. Or is that just, you know, we're gathering all the information at the moment now because we did this much work and where we're going to go with that? Is that possible, Naomi? Just a brief.
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to provide.
And even the
obviously
RMA, like we
Yep.
talked about the RMA and that fast track and how they might be ignoring some of that. What's happening with the RMA? Because all these are big impacts.
Just a bit of a moving feast.
Yeah,
almost.
and we kind of just need just a bit of a, you know, where we're at, because even I'm confused and I'm a councillor, let alone, you know, our partners.
Oh, I totally get it. There's a lot of information going around at the moment. So yeah, it's important to remember that the RMA was amended at the end of last year. So the original timeframe that we were supposed to publicly notify our freshwater instruments was December 2024, but that the RMA has been amended to, so now it says December 2027. And yeah, so we're obviously reconsidering all those all that information around doing a project refresh, which is why we're hoping to go back to council. We're having a workshop in April and then I think another meeting in June. So we're hoping to so that will be a refresh of, you know, engagement, policy development, science, all those things that wrap around the project. So we're also hoping to put some messaging as well on our public website in line with that, once that information has obviously gone to councillors for consideration.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi. I just feel as though there needs to be something that comes out, you know, especially before the, you know, the end of June or the financial year, for entities just to know, because a lot are confused what they have to get done, you know, for all their policies and where they want to go with different resource consents and stuff like that. It's so confusing, even when you look at that fast tracking, you know, now where they're ignoring even some environmental, which is huge for iwi, And then also, you know, they might not be taking some of those RMA concerns into it as well, you know, for fast tracking development. So, you know, but it's also, you know, the plan change one, just so we got a clear cut of what, you know, I know you can't look in the crystal ball, but just kind of give us a time frame, and then, you know, what needs to be done for the national policy statement, and then the freshwater. And then we also got what's the one that most important to the farmers that is coming up there?
Oh, the freshwater farm plans, you mean?
Yes, farm plan change, you know, so all that, you know, it's all about our environment and, you know, our land.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I totally get that. There's just so much information out there at the moment, and it's hard to know, isn't it, with such a changing space at the moment. Yeah, that the government has also signalled that they will be having an RMA amendment bill, and there's other potential, you know, other changes this year. So we're having to be quite pivoting on those sort of changes that are coming through as well from central government, which doesn't make it easy.
For you, Madam Co-Chair, I share your frustration, Mikhail. It's because I think that alongside all of the confusion, it's the consideration of the effort, the energy, the resource that has already gone in, and then feeling like, what, do we have to start over again? I think that there's a collective discomfort in the amount of both ratepayer dollar, but also our partners' engagement, that none of us want to feel that any of that effort is wasted. And so it is frustrating to not feel that there is a real clear pathway. I suppose on one hand, I feel positive about the move from 24 to 27, because it was feeling, the feedback I was getting from a number of constituents and various interest areas was that it was a bit rushed, that everybody wasn't feeling like they had adequate time to totally get their heads around things. So on one hand, I go, okay, a little bit more time is useful. But if we don't, more time in the absence of a very clear direction isn't necessarily useful. So certainly would endorse what Councillor Downard is asking for, which is just, I love all the effort that goes into the words that are prepared for us. Sometimes a quick diagram is also really useful for us to have on our walls, and just keep a reminder for ourselves, what is the process that we're going through, what are the parallel processes, and where is the intersect. So thank you for raising that, Councillor Denver.
Chair, I guess I just had a question, Naomi, and just to reiterate that the report very thorough. I guess for us and how we're applying Te Mana o Te Wai, of course, we can't help but think perhaps that mechanism or that framework has been somewhat siloed in this, and that the removing of that hierarchy. But I guess prior to Te Mana o Te Wai, there was some sort of step process in considering the environment and certain levels of impact and measures, in which I guess as the current policy team sort of thinking there is sort of a different way we could frame that, understanding now we're still status quo in processing consents, sort of up to 2027 as it currently stands. I guess is there ability to maintain as things are, as sort of consents, new consents and renewed consents, sort of fixed for a certain time? I mean, is there some sort of light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah, we definitely still have that draft objective that we obviously also socialise with tangata whenua and the community and sectors. So we still have that statement, you know, that we've proposed for the whole region. At this stage, because the government has said that, yeah, there would be potentially some rebalancing, we're still awaiting for further direction, I guess. And I think it's expected by mid this year. So we will understand a bit more about how that Te Mano Te Wai statement will impact obviously this process. So we're still waiting for that information, but we know that obviously Te Tori Whaimana, the government has also signalled that they'll uphold treaty obligations. So we are just staying abreast of the information as it comes to hand, really.
I always forget halfway through which am I trying this one? Good. Are there any other questions from committee members? If not, can I get motion to Evelyn and second to Delia? Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Cool, so we'll move on to item 9. Thank you, Naomi. Item 9 is the Waikato Biodiversity Accord update from Judy.
I'm here.
Sorry.
Should I come up to
Yes. Whatever's good for you, Judy.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Judy Benelson tōku ingoa, ko Orana, whakapaparanga mai, engari ko tamaki na kaurau, te whenua tupu, hei tamahiri, o noho ana, hei kai tohu ko whakahiri taio, ahau I te kunihira a rohe Waikato, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, Judy. My name is Judy Van Rossen and I work in the policy implementation team at Council as a specialist policy advisor. So I'm quite new to the policy space, and prior to that I was working in the biodiversity team and managing the Council's contestable funding program, so the Natural Refuge Fund, Environmental Measures Fund. So this report provides a progress update on the Waikato Biodiversity Accord with key stakeholders, which is one of the goals in Council's strategic direction. So just to recap, we know we've got a national policy statement for Indigenous biodiversity, or NPSIB now, and one of the directives that it contains is for regional councils to develop a regional biodiversity strategy. And these strategies are essentially a community and stakeholder-driven plan for restoring biodiversity at a landscape scale. And as well as the NPSIB, we also have strong priorities for protection and enhancement of biodiversity in our regional policy statement. So the Department of Conservation, Ministry of Primary Industries, the Kiritu National Trust, and our 11 territorial authorities and key iwi partners all have statutory responsibilities of cultural imperatives for the management of biodiversity. So what we're doing is we're seeking a commitment from these entities to be signatories to the Accord, to work together and build partnerships and coordinate and align our biodiversity activities and to develop the regional biodiversity strategy for the region. So essentially the Accord is the first step in this process. So what we've done is we've got a first draft of the Accord, which is attached in the paper to the agenda. It's in the form of a simple kind of high-level voluntary non-statutory agreement. It has a purpose statement, a set of principles and objectives, and a statement of commitment. So just to give a bit of background to how we got to this stage. So we started the process in September by carrying out some targeted reporting to the iwi co-governance hui. So Te Arawa was one of those. We then engaged with the proposed Accord partners at staff level, and we held 2 wānanga, so one in December and one in February. The first workshop was to gather ideas for the content, mainly around the principles of working together, and we also looked at examples of other accords. So these are those other accords, ones that other regional councils had developed for biodiversity, and also ones that are more local, such as the Waipara Pet Lakes and Wetlands Accord. So we then put this kaupapa into a draft document and we circulated that, and then we held a second workshop at the end of February for feedback. And we're now aiming to further refine that draft, so we are keen to get more feedback. So staff from the territorial authorities are also taking the draft accord to their governance, and we're doing some further engagement with DOC, Heritage and MPI as well. So we're looking to finalise the accord and take it to our council by the end of June. So at this stage, the accord doesn't involve sort of a commitment of resources, time or money, but becoming an accord partner or signatory signals that commitment to work together to develop a regional biodiversity strategy. And that'll be over the next 2 to 3 years. And that strategy will contain the more detail, will contain the actions to restore biodiversity. So we're looking at wider engagement during that strategy process with other stakeholders, such as community groups and industry and local iwi as well, where they are willing to be involved to ensure that we capture a wide range of views. And then agreed actions can then be costed as part of that process and brought into the next long-term plan round in 2027. So that's an important step to implement the strategy. And the accord will then be the basis, we'll come back to the accord when the strategy is completed, and that will be the basis for facilitating that regular communications and having meetings between the signatory parties to monitor how the strategies are being implemented and the progress with it. So that's really all I probably need to say at this stage. So I'm happy to answer any part.
Right, thank you, Julie. Just
Thank you for your update. Just one question. You may not be aware of the Waitangi Tribunal 262 claim around the flora and fauna. I guess there's still quite some high level in terms of strategy. That's sort of flagged in that report. A number of iwi also around Indigenous flora and fauna, I guess. Has that sort of shaped, or is it expected that perhaps it might be taken into consideration in developing?
So it's interesting because that hasn't been brought up by the iwi representatives who've been in the hui and during the engagement, but it's actually a really good point. And I guess whether it can be captured in the accord or the strategy would depend probably on the level of detail.
Yes, I imagine there might be some shared values in there and sort of expectations and working together.
Yes,
that's right level what those values are for Indigenous diversity.
Oh, that's a really good point. So we'll have a look at that and see at what level we can incorporate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have one. So just around the commitment. So looking for a commitment from each of the trusts or stakeholder partnerships that you have, that council have, and I'm sure Te Arawa iwi Trust through Joe would look at being part of the like the draft, feeding into the actual accord. Yeah, and that's part of the plan. So I mean that too would come across our board table as well.
Yes,
we've had some input, and obviously we'd be happy to sign off on something that we've been able to input and co-create. So yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Chair. And we're now starting to work on the process by which we will engage for the strategy, which is at a deeper, more wider level, so that we'll be able to the trust input into that as well as best way to engage with you.
Thank you. So if there's no further patai, I'll ask that the biodiversity accord paper be accepted. And Mary, all in favour? Aye.
Thank you very much.
Carried. Good, thank you, William.
All right, we'll move to item 10, which is on page 43 of your agenda. This is the Joint Management Agreement Obligations Implementation Report for January 24th. Only.
Tēnā koutou, ko ngā ahikini koutou, hiuri tēnei o ngā tiki whare, ngā tikapina nei i ngā whawa hoki, e pēti hini ki ngā whakauni hira ahuki. Nō reira, tēnā koutou. We're tracking along quite nicely, so I'll try my very best to keep on track. I'll keep it really brief. This first report is on the JMA obligations. And it reports on how we are progressing against the obligations in the joint management agreement, as well as identifying any challenges. This particular group, the joint committee, it is, I guess, your job to provide that oversight of the joint management agreement. And so it's really important that we do report on how well we are tracking against our obligations so that you're able to do so. And so the intention is that we'll make this a standing item going forward. So I'll just bring your attention to page 44 of the agenda, and there is a dashboard which shows how we are doing at a glimpse. Out of the 26 actions, we are on track or have completed more than half of the obligations. There are 31% of the obligations that are yet to be triggered, and 12% have delivery issues. And so 12% equates to 3 actions that we haven't been able to deliver on. So then just diving into what those 3 actions are, the first one is on page 46, and essentially this particular obligation we'll talk about a bit more in the next item, because it's about reviewing the joint management agreement. And so the time frame for review is 2 years, and we are not meeting that obligation because it's been longer than 2 years since we last reviewed the JMA. The second obligation that we are having delivery issues with relates to the development of criteria to assist our decision-making council with regard to resource consents in that pre-application phase. And so there's also commentary that goes along with each of these obligations, which I guess is attempting to give you a bit more insight into why we are having challenges. And in terms of providing that commentary, we are engaging with relevant people across the organisation that are responsible for these obligations. There is an acknowledgement from our staff in the resource consenting area that there does need to be a bit of focus on this particular obligation in order to, I guess, bring it from the red status to on track. And then just lastly, the last obligation that we're having delivery issues with is related to developing a monitoring framework. And the staff in our environmental monitoring area have flagged that it hasn't been much of a priority for the JMA, but to date, the Te Arawa River Iwi Trust have, I guess, prioritised iwi monitoring. And for those that are around, have been around for a wee while, there has been in the past quite a bit of, I guess, reporting from Arawa River Iwi on that monitoring program. But at some stage, when this does become a priority, then it will need to be something that is focused on by both of the organisations in order for us to bring this one on track. So that's all I wanted to touch on today. But are there any questions from the committee about our obligations and reporting on them?
If I can ask you a question, Molly, just on that second item, around the pre-application process, you said that it needs focus to get some traction. What would that look like? What does that look like? What focus are we going to be applying to this to ensure that we deliver on that obligation?
Just checking if, no, Mark Rockelsby is still online, he's not. But from what I understand, we have made some progress on similar obligations with one or more of our other iwi partners. And that's because it was a priority for that particular iwi to tick this off and complete the task. And so I think it's a matter of making it a priority for both parties and working on it. It does require joint effort. It can't be just one party, I guess, delivering on the action, because then we're not going to get the outcome that is, I guess, truly needed in order for both parties to be comfortable with regard to what pre-application processes should look like. And in fact, for this, we probably are reliant on the perspective of Te Arawa River Iwi Trust to, I guess, inform what criteria should look like.
And Chair, I was the boogeyman in the long-term plan bringing up that I just don't feel, and I don't know whether this is the place to bring it up, that we're achieving what we should be achieving in the joint management agreements with our partners, or, you know, the trusts. I just feel it's driven by WRC, and, you know, that's nothing against the staff or anything like that, Marley. You know, and I'm new, and I'm coming to these meetings, and I just feel as though it should be driven more by our partners, you know. And I'd like a review where we actually sit down and, you know, I know it's you know, government and legislation led that, you know, that these JMAs happen, but you know, all the money that gets spent on, you know, the policies and, you know, the meetings and stuff like that. But what are we actually doing for Te Arawa River Trust? What you know, have we actually sat down with them and going, right, what can we do for you? You know, actually, you know, achieve stuff, you know, have a list of, you know, out of my 3-year term of being on council, I'd like to know that I achieved something with Kanapanapa or Te Arawa River Trust or Tūwhare, you know, all the ones that, you know, that I'm on. But I just feel as though, again, I'm just getting lost in all this, you know, what's driven from more WRC. And I don't know whether, you know, I don't want to insult anyone and then not really seeing what we're achieving for the iwi, you know, on these JMAs. So that's where I thought I'd bring it up here, because I did bring it up in the long-term plan. I think we need to have a big review on, you know, whether this is the right, you know, do we go out to the maraes, you know, is there too many, you know, I don't know, or do we actually say, what do you want us to do, you know, what do you need us to do to achieve, you know, even if it's yearly, to say, like, you know, this is what we want to achieve at the end of the year, whether it's to do with the resource consenting, or whether it's to do with the environment, or, you know, biosecurity or anything like that. Because in the long-term plan we have, out of, you know, I'm really probably one of the few cancers that, you know, I'm really struck by how much our rates are to people and how much they can afford and what we can cut and what we can do. And we pretty much all agreed on biosecurity's a big one. You know, we've got the golden clam, we've got, you know, this weed that could be coming, you know, in the sea. You know, you saw the documentary on that on Sunday. There's a whole lot of things, but that comes back down to what we need to prioritise for, say, for Te Arawa River Trust. You know, what do they foresee as coming up in the next 3 years? That's where I am. I don't want to get caught up in, you know, my 3 years of just, you know, doing all this stuff, the policies I talked about, plan change 1, you know, that took 10 years. And how much money did everyone spend on that? And then we don't even know where that's going to end up. And then we've still got the national policy, the RMA, what's happening with 3 waters, you know, and the effect that that's going to have. But these JMAs, I think they're small enough where we can actually, grab hold of something and do something, achieve something out of it. So that's what I mean.
That's really good, Karakia. Look, thank you for your thoughts and look, thank you as well, Margaret, for the paper. And as you say, look, it's not meant as any sort of an insight because we've got to meet you halfway as well and just actually come up with some of the list of importance or priorities for us and say, well, actually, and we have been talking about that. We have been looking at actually how do we get the best use not only out of our JMAs, but also our accords and other pieces of I don't know what you want to call them, agreements. Yeah, thank you. Agreements that we have through our settlement. So, and it's not always sort of that easy, especially when the landscape keeps kind of changing as it is. But I think, and I totally agree with you, and I do appreciate your words. But also it's having that relationship that really is built on trust as well. And also knowing actually, if we have something, I'd like to look at what the low hanging fruit is. And so that we can, pick some of that low-hanging fruit and say, well, we can move on these quite quickly. And then what are those wider, bigger aspirations that we really want to achieve? It helps us to, at the moment, it's really about strengthening our position with the government, with the Crown, with the coalition government. And it's really frustrating for iwi because we work on much longer plans, as in 50 to 100-year plans, and every 3 years we seem to be, or 6-3, here we've got to change, and we don't want to do that. We feel as though our relationship with our partners are good enough that it doesn't matter, or strong enough that it doesn't matter who is in the government seat, that we should know each other. We already have a good sound idea of what each other, what our aspirations are, and also that we're, that our relationship is built on trust. I think at the moment, it's been really good to have the breakdown of especially the fast tracking consent and knowing that you guys are opposed to how it, how it stands its current form. For us, that's really, we'd be really on edge if we thought that you guys were, agreeing with it all. And it's about that transparency. But you're right, we could move past that. I believe that over the last 14 years, we've been able to really establish that. And then what are some things that are really important? I know, and there will be some other legislation that comes through the Crown's Mineral Act. That, I think knowing what your process is and what the DOC process is, there are some things that come through there that, we have affiliates that on the ground, operationally, they're having to implement and comment on some of these consent processes, and it's really just not helpful, the response that they give. So it's probably as well, that's something that we could, I think you've set us a task to actually, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, to actually come back to the table or to be able to, by the next hui, have some clear direction around some of the things that we would like to see. I think the haerenga today to go out and visit some of the projects, they're a good indication as well of some of the mahi that has been done. And I think we've got two experts in the room as well, that are being very supportive in that project space as well. And some of the joint work that we can do. So there's probably a combination of both practical and within legislation how we can support it. So thank you.
Any other?
So I have a question. So if you've got these 3 issues, what is the solution?
Under
delivery.
Yeah, under delivery issues. So for the first one that we aren't delivering on, the next item we're going to be talking about kicking off the review of the joint management agreement, and it's good that these 3 things are sitting together because I think that the review of the JMA really goes to what has been just discussed under this particular report. So hopefully by the next time we meet, we'll be able to change that status to on track. it will be very close to completing that review. As for the other two, it really takes just prioritising of those two tasks. So start finding the time to work together and move those things forward.
So is that an issue that parent needs to address? Is it, so where's the problem? Is the problem us or is the problem you? You know, so there's an issue. Is there an issue with us not coming to the table? What is it?
I wouldn't say that it's a terror issue. I'd just say that it's probably because we haven't had this type of visibility of the obligations and therefore unawareness that there are some obligations that we're not actually meeting. But the benefit of having this type of reporting is that visibility and the ability then to get the right people involved from both organisations and focused on doing the mahi to bring us back on track.
Are there any other questions? If not, do I have a mover to accept the report, receive the report? Thank you, Mary. And Delia, second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
So did that naturally lend itself, or no, we've got the review?
Yes, I might just touch on that quickly if I may. Even though we've had some good feedback already about the existing JMA and what we could potentially be doing to, I guess, move us forward. I just wanted to, I guess, highlight a couple of things. Yes, we're overdue for review, so it's good reason to undertake a review. It's always useful to review these sorts of documents just to make sure that they are, I guess, fit for purpose and continuously, I guess, improving the things that we are doing together. Myself, Joe and Nuki got together a couple of weeks ago to kick off the kōrero about how we might approach the JMA review. And we agreed that the first step is to come to the co-governance committee, identify that we need to undertake a review and put forward a proposed scope. We talked about using two mechanisms. The first, really leaning into the obligations report to understand actually what are we delivering and what can't we delivering, and getting a better understanding about, I guess, those things that we're not delivering in order to determine whether or not the obligations, the existing obligations, are still relevant, effective, or whether we need to, I guess, propose some improvements to existing obligations. But also the second mechanism is about connecting with governors and staff involved in implementation of joint management agreement, to get feedback, I guess, against a number of things, such as really, I guess, wanting to identify how we might improve things. And so some of those areas that have been identified are related to political changes. Pointed out, changes occur on a regular basis, and we just want to, I guess, reassure ourselves that the joint management agreement will endure beyond any changes at a political or a central government level. Test whether the partnership principles are still solid enough to, I guess, move us into the future. And then there was also a discussion about, I guess, testing whether these sorts of mechanisms are still effective from a governance point of view, but also the mechanisms that we've got set up at an operational level to carry the work forward. So that's in a nutshell, but I might just invite Joe to add anything.
You've done pretty well. right on time, so no, I think it's a really good sign.
So we hope to bring back another report at the next governance committee. Between now and then, we'll go through the process of assessment. We'll be connecting with governors and staff, so you can expect to hear from us. Likely to be some sort of a survey to get from you your feedback that will then inform the review.
So thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Just, I suppose just closing that item off, just really keen to see, progress in that, taking into consideration the korero that we have had today. There is a obvious appetite for real clear, outcomes associated with us coming together on a regular basis. And so just, I think it's great. We've got the dashboard that we go through. Let's make sure that alongside those real long-term holistic goals, we've got some real clear, this is what we're going to make progress on in the next window in time, however we decide the length of that window is. I suppose just really wanting to ensure that this committee feels that there is absolute warrant in coming together, because we're all time and resource poor, and so let's make sure we make the most of it. Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I just ask that the Marley's report and the review be accepted. Thank you. Gary, kia ora. All in favour?
Yeah.
Carried. Thank you.
All right, and we'll go to our last report, item 12. This is on page 52 of your agendas. This is an update on the Corbicula clam response. Right. There's Patrick joining us online. Got it, Patrick?
Kia ora tātou, called Patrick Whaley, taku ingoa. I look, if I can keep to the quick pace of this meeting, and essentially I would, if it's okay, take the report as read. I do have just a couple of points I'd like to make.
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm pretty sure that most of you will have at least as much knowledge as me or more around this response, but just a reminder that MPI is still leading what is a national biosecurity response, and Waikato Regional Council, as well as lots of others, have been supporting this since May last year. Look, given eradication is really not possible at the moment, while aspirationally I think we'd all like to get rid of the clams, we just need to try and confine them to their current distribution. So that's what a lot of the program is geared up for. And I guess the key point is MPI is kicking off a planning process to look at what does the long-term management of this program look like from this point on. And I know that you'll be involved, as well as the council and many others, in that process. So that's kicking off pretty soon. And that's it for me. So yeah, I open to questions.
Thanks for that, Patrick. I suppose just wanting to raise committee's awareness, if you haven't picked up on it, that they have found the golden clam down in the water care water treatment plant, so as far down as Tuako. So pretty significant. And I think that what's concerning about that is that, from my perspective, is the impact this is going to have on infrastructure, not just the water treatment plants along the Awa, but also obviously the hydro plant, the electricity generation that is creates considerable support for Aotearoa. So just concerning, and I suppose, Patrick, committee members probably noticed the announcements yesterday around staffing cuts for MPI. Have we got any insight into whether or not those proposed staff reductions are going to impact on MPI's leading of this response?
Not as such. I mean, we're starting to get, text from people that are starting to find out what it means, but nothing formally at this point. I just think it's going to make it pretty hard for them, to maintain their level of effort, because it's pretty hard what they're going through at the moment.
I'm quite critical, Patrick. I think the level of effort has been a bit short. We look at, even like, I had a meeting with Mangakino Whakani committee, and they were quite concerned that there's no wash bays out there or anything like that. And where do they stand, or where do we stand? The crossover between the different entities and stuff like that. And I just said to them, look, get a wash, I told the Global District Council, get a wash bay in there as soon as, some of us have to take responsibility. But even without the job loss of the MBI, I mean, I foresee that's going to push more work on WRC, because some of that does, where it's been left short, it's our area. And I still tend to think that WRC or environmental, look at environmental Waikato. So, it's only going to get harder, I feel, for WRC and your team, Patrick. But yeah, I do think they've fallen short to a lot of areas, and that's probably why it has, filtered down the line to the bottom of the lake.
I just wanted to raise people's awareness of it, because obviously we all in our various interactions will have opportunity to share our concerns with a broader audience and ministers. So just wanted to make sure that committee members were aware of the continued issue that this presents. And as Councillor Dallard raises, cutbacks at central government level tend to fall on ratepayers to cover, even though we know that this is an area that could have significant nationwide impact. I do note that our Chief Executive, Chris McClay, is online and has a comment. Chris.
Yeah, kia ora tātou, ko Chris McClay ho. Chair Pamela, it's I see in the Herald today that they've got a breakdown of the changes and roles at MPI. 131 Biosecurity New Zealand staff that they suggest is in that, so it is very significant. And to the point of our own resourcing, in the LTP, we are proposing increasing the natural heritage rate to put more effort into biodiversity and biosecurity. And there's also a second option that we're asking the community if they'd want to do even more. So just to bring that to your attention. Thanks.
Thanks for that.
Sorry, just one other point. So MPI did provide the update for the committee. So and I've said to them that any feedback I will be firing straight back to them. So I will take any feedback you have for MPI and fire it straight to them.
Thanks, guys.
Right. So
my feedback.
Yeah, we've heard the feedback around the local response, in particular to this particular issue. But also, I think you're hearing the committee's collective concern about what these staffing cuts are going to mean in relation to either control or eradication of the infestations that are already present in our rohi, but also the prevention of any further incursions. I think that we all are quite aware of the risk to, say, agriculture of some of the potential incursions that are in place in other parts of the world, and we wouldn't want to see them here. It certainly would have a considerable negative impact on our economic security going forward. So so feel free to feedback, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Nibon.
Oh, thanks, Pamela. Hey, just thinking with those cuts, particularly in biosecurity and stuff, it might be one to note for our next MPs catch up whenever that is. And I note too in Rotorua there, of course, you've got the Minister of Agriculture right in town as well. So I think it's worth leaning on some of these contacts, eh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
I was just a comment, thanks for the update. I guess I had a couple of questions. The one, have we seen movement in the clam go upstream, sort of from the initial point? So I haven't sort of received kind of a map or indication of how far up it's come. Do we know?
So the good thing is we've done a lot of surveillance. Well, MPI and with the support of loads of others have done loads of surveillance, and as yet they haven't been found anywhere except for Maraetai. So from there downstream.
Yep.
So
Right,
that's
okay.
really positive.
Yeah.
And I just would note that it's probably, downstream's going to get quite a lot worse if, as the build up in numbers, unfortunately.
Patrick, is it possible we can have something sent out to all our partners and even us to where the actual clams are and how far they've gone down?
I will pass that on to MPI. I fed something back yesterday.
We can have it from someone, because it'll be interesting to see exactly how far it's gone down or where it is, where it's started.
We've just finished our eDNA testing for Tuparangi and all our lakes, and so far they've all come back thankfully negative, touch wood. So I guess, this sort of hearing the staff reduction at that level at MPI, and this was one of the issues that we sort of raised early in the piece, sort of iwi and hapu and whānau, even we've seen whānau from Marae, sort of default automatically into their kaitiaki role. So it seemed to just be that effort at place, right? So, I wonder if there is a sort of shift for resource to understand some of those voluntary efforts that are going, we've raised that already with MPI, but it'd be good to sort of work together as we will too with Bay Plenty through their long-term plan process.
Yeah, I do think it's important that they know all of that voluntary effort, but I also, there's a double-edged sword there too, though, isn't there? Because I often feel like if we say, oh no, we're doing this space, then they go, sweet, we don't have to. And we wouldn't want to send that message. It's a delicate balance on the way we deliver that message, eh, Patrick?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff. All right. Are there any other questions from the committee on this report? All right. If not, I'm happy to move. Julia, a second. All those in favor?
Right.
Opposed? Carried. Well done, Madam Co-Chair. Look at that, 11:18, only 3 minutes.
Fantastic. And I feel like we were able to discuss where we needed to discuss things. So
Yeah.
also great. All right, we'll close with our karakia. You want to close us with our Karakia Whakamutunga?
Mi no tātou kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atapai o tō tātou ara ki a iwi graiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te moeroa tatu. Amen. Nāke aki. Amen.
Okay, so what is the plan from here?
So we'll declare the meeting closed at 11:19.
Kia ora koutou, everyone.